Should we make sense? Think before you answer that. We're talking about those insignificant 1-cent pieces in your pocket or purse. It may or may not come as a surprise that it now costs the U.S. Mint almost 2 cents to make a penny and almost a dime to make a nickel. If the economy of that eludes you, join the club. As we first reported in February, even in Washington, where they literally have the right to print money and where anything under $1 billion is chump change, there's an ongoing debate over whether it's worth the trouble to keep making sense.
They're still warm. Can you feel it?
Every year, the U.S. Mint turns out 8 billion shiny new pennies using high-tech presses that operate faster than the eye can see, stamping out Abe Lincoln on blank pieces of metal.
They're making 12 pennies per second. We're making a couple million pennies a day.
And, says U.S. Mint Director Edmund Moy, despite inflation, despite their lowly status, 8 billion pennies still add up to
$80 million. That's real money.
Trouble is, to get 80 million in pennies, the government spends $134 million. And to produce 1.3 billion nickels, as the Mint did last year, costs $124 million, even though the coins are worth only about half that much. It's weird economics when it really comes down to it, isn't it?
Well, from our perspective at the United States Mint, it's unsustainable. You can't sustain losses on pennies and nickels and expect to be a viable organization that benefits the American people.
How did we get this fix?
You know, coins are made out of metal, and worldwide demand for copper, nickel, and zinc have dramatically increased over the last 3 years. That's what's primarily driving up the cost of making the penny and nickel.
Nickels are made mainly of copper. Pennies are 98% zinc. On the frenzied commodity exchange, the price of copper's tripled in the last 5 years. Zinc has doubled. Both are in heavy demand, used in everything from electrical wiring to suntan lotion. So both coins are worth less than the metals they contain. But if you're thinking of putting in a backyard smelter and melting down your spare change to make a profit, forget it. The Treasury Department has declared that illegal. Was there a genuine fear that people were going to melt their pennies and sell them by the pound?
Well, you know, other countries who've been in the same situation have ended up having shortages because people melt them. My colleagues in India, at the Indian Mint, have noted that once the rupee became more valuable, melted down as razor blades, they disappeared overnight, and there was a shortage of rupees that India is still recovering from.
In the 5 o'clock shadow of the rupee's close shave, Washington is considering ways to reduce the cost of making pennies and nickels. Among them, giving the Mint authority to use cheaper metals like steel. And though efforts in Congress to retire the penny altogether have failed in past years, its detractors say the time has come.
Inflation has rendered the penny nearly valueless, right? If you can't buy anything with a penny, if it takes at least a nickel or a dime to buy anything, then that individual unit just doesn't serve much good.
Stephen Dubner is the co-author of that bestseller, Freakonomics, a zany look at money and American culture. He puts the penny in the same category as your pesky appendix and other useless relics.
It's like having a 1/5 finger on your hand. You have to trim the nail, I gotta do this and that, I gotta buy 5.5 fingered gloves, but wouldn't it be easier just to have the 5? And that really is what the penny is about. It's just not useful.
Dubner concedes the country suffers from penny-citis, a love affair with the penny that's hard to shake. After all, who's on it but that true American idol, honest Abe Lincoln, who as a young store clerk walked 3 miles to return 6 pennies he'd overcharged a customer.
I think that the two big reasons to keep the penny are inertia, because it takes a lot of work to get rid of something that's ingrained, and nostalgia. But you need to put a price on even nostalgia.
But is there, don't you think, there's a kind of sentimental attachment? Now,
Right.
Everyone remembers their piggy banks when they're kids.
Sure.
Save your pennies, and all of the old adages that
Right.
go with the penny.
Penny for your thoughts.
Penny saved.
But I
is
would
penny
argue
earned.
that, you know, in the old days you might have said a penny for your thoughts as a nice kind of way of saying, you know, whatever you're daydreaming about, it's worth something. Now it's an insult. A penny for my phone? It's only worth a penny? Come on.
What do you do with your pennies?
Well, I have kids, so I try to teach them early on not to get any pennies. I try to teach them early on to get rounded up or rounded down at any opportunity. When we play Monopoly at home, we get rid of the 1s and 5s. It's like, it doesn't matter.
But its fans say a penniless America would leave the penniless truly penniless, because merchants would round prices up to the nearest nickel. Mark Weller is the voice of Americans for Common Sense, a pro-penny group that claims that rounding up will cost Americans $600 million a year.
You're going to be hurting those that can least afford it. The folks that don't have checking accounts, that don't have charge cards, are the ones that are going to get hit.
Weller says without the penny, charities too would suffer, on the theory that people are less likely to donate as many nickels. As it is, penny drives around the country collect tens of millions of dollars a year for medical research, for the homeless, for education.
You have school groups all over the country that are raising funds for important causes on Katrina relief or new computers or other issues for their schools.
But as Weller freely admits, he's got a financial interest in the high cost of penny pinching. Remember that shower of zinc pennies at the Mint? Well, Weller's a lobbyist for Jardin Zinc, the Tennessee company that sells those little blank discs for the Mint to turn into Lincoln pennies. If you don't have the penny out there, it would be a major kick in the pants to the zinc industry, wouldn't it?
I think if you look at overall at the uses of zinc in the economy, that this is a smaller part of that overall. I think if you look back at the merits of the argument, which is what happens if you don't have the penny and you round transactions to the nickel, that's a loser for charity groups, that's a loser for the American public.
And on the contention that rounding to the nickel would force prices up, Mint Director Moy says Weller may have a point.
We've taken a look at the studies of countries who have gotten rid of the lowest denomination coin. There's always at least a one-time inflationary hit upwards.
Prices have a habit of doing that, don't they?
People are generally in the business of trying to make money.
But the business of making money literally isn't all bad. The cost of producing most currency is far below its face value. Paper money, for example, 1s, 5s, 10s on up, cost 6 cents each to print. Only the penny and nickel are big-time losers.
The nickel you can argue about. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but to me, the penny is just obvious.
Now for the nerd's eye view. Jeff Gore is a young scientist at MIT who says keeping the penny is costing all of us in more ways than one. At work, he does research in biophysics, but away from the lab, he's a fearless crusader against the penny, arguing that if time is money, the cent is senseless.
I read somewhere that 2 or 2.5 seconds are wasted per cash transaction as a result of the use of pennies. And I started thinking, well, that doesn't sound like very much, but maybe it starts adding up if you do the calculation.
Take me through it.
Now,
He's devised an Einsteinian equation of productivity to determine how much time America wastes dealing with pennies, counting them out in stores, giving them back in change, fishing them out of the couch, and putting them in penny jars.
You come out to a wasted time of 2.4 hours per year per person, which actually is quite a lot.
So we're each wasting
over 2 hours every year just because of pennies.
And with wages in the country averaging $17 an hour, that means pennies are costing each of us $41 a year.
And you multiply that by 250 million adults in this country, you come out to $10 billion per year, which is quite a lot of money.
Of course, if you put a price tag on lost time, that's nothing compared to the time America wastes in traffic, on the internet, and having to listen to imperfect strangers talking on their cell phones. Still, the debate over the penny is one into which everybody puts their 2 cents worth, or call it 4 cents worth.
I mean, if you ask Americans, do you want to keep or abolish the penny? Most people say they want to keep it. Now, I would argue that those same people would have said they want to keep the rotary telephone, They wanted to keep, carbon paper. They wanted to keep the buggy whip. But you know what? We've done all right without all those. And I think that if the penny were no longer around, people would be okay.
Americans may differ on what the utility of a penny is. I know when I go home, I have a penny jar just like everyone else, but at the end, I still turn those pennies in because they're worth real money.
You, as an amateur coin collector, I suspect you're in favor of keeping the penny in your heart of hearts, yes?
Well, as a public official, I have no private opinions, but I do know that a lot of people are attached to the penny, and as long as they continue to being in demand, the Mint has an obligation to continue making them.
In fact, the Mint is in the process of redesigning the back of the penny to mark 2 milestones next year, the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and the 100th anniversary of the Lincoln penny itself. Get rid of it? Not likely.